And so it is encouragement to keep up the good work of homeschooling even when it's hard. They're little inspiring, motivating, attitude orienting chapters that help you see the good, the sanctification happening even when days do not go the way they planned, because homeschool days often do not go the way that they planned, and it's so easy to become discouraged as a homeschooling mom. I know that from personal experience, and I know that from talking to so many moms over the years, in person and online. Homeschooling can be discouraging, but it is especially so if we come at it with unrealistic expectations. And so we will be talking some about expectations that we might have today, going into a fresh homeschool year, and it's kind of like a whole New Year's time where you might go into it thinking, oh, it's a whole new year. That means it's a fresh start. This is the year that we're going to have it all together. This is the year I'm going to work my plan perfectly. This is the year it's all going to be awesome. Or I, at least, am going to be awesome this year. And yeah, that just is not the way it's going to be. Let's see, I see that Jordan is literally starting her first day of homeschooling today, a 7 and 4-year-old with a 2-year-old in the mix. Welcome to the chaotic life of homeschooling. So especially as we start a homeschool year, but even more so if you are just beginning your homeschool journey, we need to go into it with realistic expectations and an understanding that it is going to be work and it will take effort. I like to say homeschooling is intense parenting. It's not really that different from parenting. So when you homeschool, you just sign up to parent for the whole gig all day long, all the kids all day long. Education is just forming one aspect of parenting. It's raising children up and discipling them in the fear and admonition of the Lord. So, if you send your kids to school, you're letting the school parent your children for a lot of the waking hours of the day. When we homeschool, we are parenting our children fully and completely, and that takes stamina. It's work. It's tiring, but it is good work that God equips us to do because He's called us to parent our kids. So we're going to talk today about starting our homeschool day because, as I like to say, starting is the hardest part. It's so easy to get off on the wrong foot with a homeschool day and to just let everything derail from there. How we start the homeschool day is a part of our logistics. We often, if we're planning our homeschool day, we think about the curriculum that we're going to use, and we think about the schedule that we will create. But logistics is the act of putting those two things together in a way we can actually implement them. So logistics is the management of the details of an operation, making it actually operate. So we can have the schedule that looks great on paper. We can have the curriculum in the bins and the papers printed and the pages ready to go. But putting those two things together and actually doing it is a logistics operation. especially because it's not just us. Even if it was just us that we had to operate, that would be hard enough. But we have, multiple students and ourselves that are all players in this thing, this homeschool day thing that we have to make happen. And so coordinating everyone's efforts and attention and work is a big thing in and of itself. So even just recognizing that logistics is a huge part of what we're doing as homeschooling moms helps. Because if we approach the day thinking, oh, my job is just to teach, then, we're flummoxed by the way the day actually happens. But we are the logistics coordinator of our homeschool, and that's probably one of the biggest jobs that we have. So I like to say that starting is the hardest part. So starting is the hardest part because inertia is a thing, right? Inertia is part of the way the world works. And so we just need to accept reality and work with reality rather than try to fight it or assume that if we did things the right way, then it would be easy. But inertia is a thing. It's a part of the laws of how energy works, and that includes our energy. Things that are in motion tend to stay in motion, and things at rest tend to stay at rest. And so the way that we start our homeschool day does set the tone for the rest of the day, because we have to get that energy moving forward in a productive way, or else we're just fighting ourselves and fighting our kids and trying to take something that's at rest and make it active by maybe less than pleasant means. Like, I'm going to pick you up and throw you. Will that work? So we have to have some good practical strategies for starting our homeschool days because it is important. It's not that there's no recovery if we don't start well, but the way that we start will not only set the tone for the rest of the day, but usually that if we can get started well, then that first chunk of the day is our most valuable part of our homeschool. So really the temptation to just have a lazy start, a relaxed start, a slow start to the homeschool day is stealing the best part of the homeschool day from ourselves and our kids. Now, I'm not saying that that has to be 8 a.m. or anything, but whenever the start of your homeschool day is, the very first part is your most potent part of your homeschool day. So we need to be strategic and intentional around the start of our day, or we'll lose that most potent part of our day. So a big part of starting the homeschool day is being in charge. You, as the mother, you are the God-given authority in your homeschool with your kids, and you are in charge. And so unless we step into that role and embrace that role and embrace that authority, the natural authority that we have, and direct the day and our children, then it's going to feel like fighting, like pulling or pushing, and really nature abhors a vacuum, right? And that includes a leadership vacuum. We have to act as the leader in our homeschool, or else every single person, every one of the children will be trying to take that role. Someone will fill that role. And it's way better if it's mom than the 2-year-old. But there are a lot of situations where the 2-year-old is running the show. And that is not going to go well for homeschooling if that's the case. So when we homeschool, we have to embrace being in charge. But we know from being alive, being adults for, a decade, maybe 2 decades, 3 decades. Some of us have more decades of adulthood under our belt than others, but still, even 5 years of adulthood should inform us that 1, being in charge is hard, and 2, to be in charge of others, you actually have to be in charge of yourself first. And sometimes being in charge of yourself is more difficult than being in charge of others. And sometimes we give up, abandon our role as being in charge of other people because we don't want to be in control and in charge of ourselves. I'm the kind that tends to find it easier to be in charge of others than myself. Like, I can tell everyone else what to do just fine, and then I never listen to myself. So there are different ditches to fall into there. But when it comes to the start of the homeschool day, it has less to do with what the kids are doing and how they respond and react as to our own self-management, self-government, self-control, and our leadership begins there. So starting the day is primarily about kicking our own selves into gear. Because if we can kick our own selves into gear, then our homeschool day will start, because our homeschool day depends on our leadership. And I'm not saying that then everyone will instantly fall in line, but we'll have overcome the biggest hurdle, the hurdle that's bigger than any 2-year-old. Because I will tell you, I have homeschooled through many babies and toddlers. And if I am embracing my role and doing what I know I ought to be doing, then when I pick up and take the fussy 2-year-old up to his room and tell him he has to stay there because he's disrupting school, fussy babies go to bed, then I'm not flummoxed and frustrated and feeling at loose ends, because I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be parenting my children, and I'm fully engaged in that process right now. So that includes disciplining the toddler. Like, that's just his curriculum for the day. There's curriculum for each one of the children, and I am administering the discipline that is needed at the time. And so when I get started embracing my role and my responsibility, then I am setting a tone of taking responsibility. And without hypocrisy, I can require the same of my children. We can be all practicing self-control together. And that's a huge part of what the homeschool day is. All of us practicing self-control, and many of us drop the ball there. We're not practicing self-control. And so it's our job to notice and to call people back. And that starts with ourselves. And then what we are doing when we have self-control is cheerfully calling each child back to practice. They get opportunities all the time throughout the whole homeschool day to practice self-control. And that is the biggest life lesson that is so lacking in the world today, that if they have that life skill of being able to stop and redirect their own attention and work, that's huge. That used to be normal. That used to be just what adults expected of children, and children rise to the expectations. And it's not anymore. And so it's going to take more work, because we are working against the grain of our worldview, the world's worldview. We're working against the grain of society and societal expectations and examples that we see. But if we see number one curriculum item on our day as helping our children practice self-control, that includes attention, that includes responding respectfully, like pretty much everything that we want our children to do falls under the subheading. It requires self-control as a prerequisite. And so it's not something that you finish like a math page and it's done. It's something you practice. It's scales on the piano that never feel fun in the moment to do, but afterwards you have increased skill and competency. So as far as expectations go, we have to not expect self-control, attention, not dawdling, responding properly, not fighting, all these things to be something that we tell them what to do. And then as long as we tell them in the right way or the right number of times, or practice it correctly the first day, then it's going to be smooth sailing and we'll just be able to do math and history and whatever. No, all of it is also an opportunity to practice self-control, which we all have to be continually practicing, so it doesn't go away. Yes, self-discipline is hard. It's super, super hard. And it's what we need to be practicing ourselves. It's why starting is the hardest part. And if we start from practicing ourselves, then we also need to be requiring our children to practice self-discipline. And just think about what an advantage in life they will have as they have that skill. But they don't learn that skill alone. They learn self-discipline, self-control by practicing, by having the opportunities. And so math, history, science, all of these have knowledge or skill goals of their own, but each of them also is an opportunity to practice self-control and self-discipline. So, there. Julia has a great testimony in the chat. She says, this has been my main focus for our school year this year. They started in July, and it has made a world of difference. Her kids have really noticed and are taking school seriously too. I actually owe my kids an apology for expecting them to just do school, even if I wasn't in the right mindset last year. Yes, thank you, Julia, for sharing that. So, there's going to be a void, a vacuum of leadership if we don't step into that role. And especially with either your oldest or your youngest will recognize before you do that there is a power void. And they will step into that role and take it over before you even know what's going on. So it takes mental gearing up as the one who is supposed to be in charge to head into that day, setting yourself up for success. And setting yourself up for success will then trickle down and allow your children to be set up for success. Part of being in control is having a plan. And I know I fell into the trap for many years when our first several years of homeschooling. When they're 5 and 6 and the homeschool day takes about an hour or so, you say, okay, we're going to do school. We sit, we do the things, and we move on. But then as it built up and I had some more things on the list and more things I wanted my older children to do, I had my plan written for me. I knew how long things were supposed to take. I knew what we did, what day. But I expected my children to just follow orders. And that allowed me a little bit of flexibility, which sometimes is just an excuse for slacking off. I wanted the flexibility to be able to just not do school when I didn't feel like it. And so I didn't share my plans. I just wanted, he's 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, just to do what I tell him. And it didn't go very well. We started most school days arguing and fighting and sometimes crying. And I felt like I didn't know what was going on, because to me it seemed like, well, we're doing the same thing every day. Why does this have to be a fight? This is just, we show up, we start school, you do what I say. What's wrong with that? Until I talked to him some more, we worked through things, and I tried a few things and realized that my oldest, also a type A, felt like the day was capricious, which if I was honest, it actually was, because it was just whatever I decided we were going to do next is what we did next. And I was kind of fooling myself that we were following a plan, the plan I had written, because we were actually just doing whatever I felt like. And so that might have been being in charge and leading, but it wasn't leading well or effectively. It wasn't actually effectively being in charge because I wasn't actually in charge of myself first, and I wasn't being consistent. And when I started we put a big whiteboard up in the main area where we did school, and I started writing out every day, or usually after they went to bed at night, I would put up on the whiteboard the plan for the day. And it would show, like, this is how much time we're going to spend doing school. Then there's free time. Then there's this other thing happening, but the school has to be done first. And sometimes I would write those expectations up on the board just so we were all on the same page. Like, you cannot do anything. You cannot do free reading. You cannot play with Legos. You cannot have any fun until your schoolwork is done first. And your chores should be done before we start school, or else you have to do them at lunchtime, or, different, whatever expectation we were working on at the time, it would go on the board so that we had that clear communication. And that didn't just help my students, although it definitely did, because I realized to them, they didn't know when school was ever going to end. And so the assumption is that it was never going to end. So they might as well try to get as much free time as they can, because the school was just going to go on forever. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they dawdle, it takes more time. Schoolwork does take all day, but it doesn't have to. But they didn't see that until I lined it out and we talked about it. And see, the amount of work that we have, this is the amount of work that's planned. This is how long it should take. And if we just get the work done in the time allotted, there's all this free time. But if you dawdle and argue and fight over it, we're still going to get this work done. And you're just eating up your time. And we did a few weeks of that. Our mornings started so much more smoothly because the expectations were aligned between myself and my students. And also, putting it up on the board was holding me accountable. So it was better because I was not able to flake out on myself and on my kids without it being obvious. So my biggest tip for getting the homeschool day started with everyone together is to start with a song. So this helps even me for several reasons. For a long time, I would, whether it was math or morning time, whatever we decided to start our day with, people would be doing chores or riding their bike or playing Legos when they shouldn't be. People would be everywhere doing random things. Sometimes there were times where I did have a motivated student who had already gotten started with his checklist because he wanted to be done quickly. And then when I wanted to start our official start of school, I was interrupting everybody. I was interrupting people's playtime. I was interrupting some people's school that they'd already gotten started on. And starting is hard because there's a lot to coordinate when they're just like, okay, we're going to start school. Oh, blowout. Oh, toddler in the bathroom needing my attention. It can be hard to start the school day. And so we started, I can't even remember how many years ago. Lots of years ago. We might be coming up on 8 years ago. I tried this, and it has worked so well that we do it almost all the time now. When everyone should be at the table, I play a song. Now, at our previous house, we had whole house speakers connected with Bluetooth, so that was really awesome and easy. I could just hit play from my phone or just tell Siri, play Little Boy Heart Alive. That's our song. It has been the whole time. Same song. So whenever this song plays, it means by the end of this song, you need to come to the table with whatever it is that you need. So it's 3.5 minutes. And so it's enough time for everyone to mentally shift gears, put away what they were doing, and come to the table. And there's no more like, oh, just a second, just let me go get my water, just let me go get my whatever. You have you hear the start of the song, and you know you have 3.5 minutes, and everyone actually starts moving when the bridge of the song begins, because that means you have 1 minute. It's funny, the sudden house activity that happens when the bridge of the song starts playing. It's pretty amusing. But if you don't have it, if you didn't get a drink of water or whatever, like, you're just going to have to wait till the end of morning time because you had this fair warning. And so it allows everyone a proper amount of transition time with expectations without mom yelling, which really helps the homeschool day atmosphere. It also, and partly it's because it's not mom yelling anymore, right? The song sets the tone as well. You know, music is very powerful for setting emotions, energy. Our mood is very much affected by music. So when we start the day with music that's fun and upbeat, that helps all of us start more upbeat. Even for myself, I felt like after hearing that song in the morning, it helped me have the right tone myself, because it was like an energy I could channel and like tune into. and be like, okay, this is how we're starting the day. Instead of having to just gin that up myself out of nothing, I could move forward from the song and continue that flow. And so it helped me lead with a better atmosphere, and it set that expectation with everybody, because music changes our mood. And so we can harness that reality in our favor. Oh yeah, there have to be consequences for not coming to the table. So we've done different things over the years because it depends on what's causing them to not get there on time. So sometimes it's like, oh, well, I guess the music just has to be louder because the person in the bedroom with the door closed couldn't actually hear it until it was too late. So, there are all, especially by the time you get to, 9 years old and up. If they were under 9, then I considered it a part of my responsibility. Start the song playing. 9 and up are responsible for themselves. I'm responsible for the youngers to make sure, okay, the music's starting. Do you hear it? Or like, oh, the song's starting. Let's get moving, and make sure that they are practicing following through. But they need mom breathing down their neck in a cheerful, happy way. But if it's like 9 is, a rough transition age. It really depends on the kid. But something like 8 or 9 and under, I still, we're talking about reasonable expectations. It's still a part of my job to get them to the table on time. And that is the safeguard, the audible cue for all of us as to what's supposed to be happening right now. 9 or 10 and up are responsible for themselves, and we've done different consequences depending on what is at the root of the not coming. Honestly, we slacked off on consequences when half the time it was me not showing up on time. I was probably the worst offender for not actually having my things in the place when the song ended. And if I wasn't, how could my kids be expected to? And so the biggest thing that undermined the whole starting with a song thing working was, again, me. Leading, setting the example, being in charge of my own self. Now, there were baby years in there too, where it's like, okay, I started the song, but I have to go take care of the baby. So you guys start without me. That was sometimes a thing, but it was also sometimes just me basically being a hypocrite and needing to therefore repent to my children and again model. This is what we do when we don't follow through. I have to ask your forgiveness for giving you a poor example, for not honoring our commitment, for disobeying my own rule. Because if I don't follow it, how can I expect you to follow it? Let's try to do better. And so if it's in that kind of learning mode, then maybe I would just have to require an apology. In a public, you have to ask for the forgiveness of everyone here and receive the forgiveness, and then we're fine and we can start moving. Or there were some times where if you aren't, I had a list of jobs and I could send a job, or sometimes it was, well, if you didn't show up on time, you just aren't allowed. You can't come. That one, I didn't use so much. I know other people were able to use that one, but mine were totally fine. They probably would rather be alone than in the living room with everyone there, so that wasn't a good one for us. Yeah. It, um, if the problem is the child not showing up at the end because, again, they are trying to be in charge, then you have to have some kind of consequence that clearly demonstrates who's in charge. And that means not being angry, but being definite, like kind of like the tone I'm using now, right? This is I'm in charge and you are not, and you are going to do something because of this. But it is a power struggle, or there can be power struggles. If it's a power struggle, then you need to talk to your husband and brainstorm ways to win the power struggle, because there's not going to be a successful, happy homeschool unless you're in charge. And especially if your oldest is a boy, you need to get your husband's input on that, and maybe even have your husband talk to your boy about who's in charge, and that when mom says to do something, just picture dad standing right back there too, because dad says it too. So it takes discernment and wisdom as a homeschool mom evaluating the situation. There is no one size fits all, and then put this consequence in place and then everything's smooth sailing. It's really trying to discern what's at the root here. Are they just having problems with executive functioning and they need a little bit more shepherding through this, a little bit more coaching? Then we need to do more coaching. Or is it defiance? Is it a power struggle? In which case, mom has to win the power struggle. I would say, if, as someone who's graduated 2 boys from my homeschool, and also have brothers and friends, and I know homeschooling middle school and high school boys is not something everyone can do. But you cannot homeschool middle school and high school boys unless you are in charge. And you become in charge when they are 8, 9, 10, and 11. And a lot of those, that 11 and 12 is a time where it's another testing time, where it's who's in charge. So you might need extra parenting advice, backup, ideas, but that is what's happening. That's what's at stake at that time. And it's not like everyone has to homeschool middle or high school boys. There are other options that can work, but that's a thing. If you aren't in charge, homeschooling middle school and high school, it's already hard, and it's just going to be flat terrible. So it's really, really a high stakes situation there in a way. Yes. Oh, Latoya, that's a great point. Latoya says, for single moms, you can enlist a youth pastor, a grandpa, uncle, family friend, male coach. Yes, find people who can give you some backup, because having sons, they need a male role model too. And it's on the one hand, it's okay. It's age developmentally appropriate for them to test you, to try to assert dominance. It's what they're trying to do, and it's developmentally appropriate, but you just have to be able to rise to meet the challenge. And most of us moms, and like I say, I'm kind of a dominant type of personality. And still, I definitely needed backup with my boys. Yeah, a pastor, someone speaking into their life and letting them know that they can be strong and leaders and listen to their mother. That's really the big lesson that a 12-year-old boy needs, and it's going to take like 2 years and a lot of coaching to get to that point. So starting with a song. And you know how songs can just diffuse tension sometimes? It's so helpful. When recognizing our expectations going into our homeschool, that we are all people, mothers are people, our children are people, and what are people like? We have to make sure that we're not expecting something superhuman from ourselves or from our children, but we're recognizing that we have a job and a responsibility in front of us. It's our responsibility to parent our children. It's the children's responsibility to do their work. And we all feel resistance to effort, to work. And that's just the way it is. And now there are things that we can do to help overcome that resistance more regularly and feel that resistance less strongly. The more you feed the resistance, the stronger it gets. The more you starve it and ignore it and move past it, the weaker it gets. But it's kind of always there. It's just a part of our sin nature. And it's really easy to fall into the modern culture's assumptions from Rousseau that by nature we are good and will want to do good things. But we are actually by nature lazy and wanting to do our own things. We're by nature selfish. And so being called to parent others, being called to apply ourselves to learning and work and something outside of ourselves calls up internal resistance. That's just part of the gig. It's a part of what we're learning how to live together. And so if you feel resistance in the morning, that's normal. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It means that you need to move past it and move through it before it will weaken. And it's the same with the kids. They are going to feel resistance to doing their math. They are going to feel resistance to obeying. They are going to feel resistance to listening and not staring out the window. And there's a sense in which we can expect that, so we're watching for it and we're calling them back. But we're not expecting that if we had the right plan or the right curriculum or the right books, then there would be no resistance. Resistance is a fact of life and something that it's why we need self-discipline to come back to the topic at hand, to what we should be paying attention to. So having those expectations in line with the nature of the world and the nature of people is a huge help, because we aren't looking for the magic solution that will make everything easy for everyone all the time. Instead, we notice that, oh, my child doesn't like algebra. No biggie. Totally normal and no excuse. This is just a part. You have to learn the algebra and you have to learn to apply yourself, because liking it doesn't come until after the effort. So the resistance is there before the effort, and the learning it and enjoying it comes after the effort. But sometimes we want all of the enjoyment and affection and knowledge and interest to happen first in order to overcome resistance, and that's not actually the way it works. Resistance comes first, effort pushes through that, and on the other side of effort is interest and engagement and enjoyment. So pushing through the resistance is worth it. And when we see that, that gives us the motivation that we need to push through resistance for ourselves and and help our kids learn how to do the same. Okay. I have a chapter actually in Simply Convivial, my book about resistance. There's a whole chapter on resistance. Even if you didn't win a copy of the book, I do have a free ebook that goes along with it that includes tips, including starting with a song that you can all have for free. So I just put that as the green button below, 3 Steps to a Convivial Homeschool. And I'll also put the link here. So you're all winners. And so the 3 steps in there are all super practical things that you can do to improve the logistics and the mood of your homeschool. Maybe you are new here and you are not sure what convivial means. We will talk more about convivial tomorrow. So convivial means doing life together cheerfully, which is really what we all want with homeschooling, right? We want to do all of life together, and we want that to be done in fellowship with one another. And so I have a community called Simply Convivial Continuing Education, and it's not only for homeschoolers. Most of it is for homemaking and managing life. But there is a homeschooling component because many of the ladies inside our community and myself homeschool. And so that's always kind of the background for many of us. It's part of what we are managing when we are managing life. So right now is a great time to become part of our community because it's August 1st. We always have a monthly topic, and this month's topic is planners. And we are going to put together the 5 pieces of a planner that make your planner work. No matter what format you use, it's not about buying a specific planner. It's about having the information that you need in front of you and then actually looking at it. So we're going to spend the month talking about that and putting together planners and using planners in a way that actually helps us get the right things done. If you join now, you'll have enough time to work through Homemaking 101 before beginning Work of Homeschooling with us. Work of Homeschooling is our 6-module course that is accountability for moms in having those logistical elements of our day in place and practiced so that we can get momentum in our homeschools. And so we're going to be starting that September 2nd, which should be good timing to just get into that fall rhythm and routine of knowing a plan and then working that plan out while trying to keep everyone on board with the plan and keeping up our energy to do that. Because sometimes the kids wear us down and make us want to just give it up. And so we need, especially at the beginning of our school year, to just really dig in and put that time through so that we beat out the resistance. Because the resistance will be strong, but if we put forth the effort, the resistance becomes weaker and weaker. We will see fruit from working the plan. So the work of homeschooling is about showing up and doing the work of homeschooling ourselves as moms consistently. And there are different pieces that we put in place to help us do that. So as some of them we'll be talking about the next 2 weeks, but there are 6 modules in the course. And the discipleship, the mentoring, the support and insight of the community really is so uplifting and encouraging and helpful because we are not alone. If you find homeschooling or homemaking, keeping up with life to be difficult, it's easy to feel like we're the only ones, that you are the only one who has a hard time with this, but you aren't. And there are many, many other women pouring themselves into their family. And when we have a community of us together sharing, then the people who are seeing and noticing the fruit can share that and encourage those of us who are feeling discouraged at the moment and not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And we all go through those different phases. And when we're together, we can help build one another up and lift one another up in prayer and in encouragement and in insight, so that we can be more effective in our lives, in our families, in our communities. So that's what Simply Convivial Continuing Education is all about. You can learn more about that. I'm going to change the link, and that will explain more about the courses and the things that are available inside Simply Convivial Continuing Education. And we have lots of our members are here today too, and it's always fun to see familiar faces and know that we aren't alone, that it is worth it, that we are doing a good work, and we need the encouragement to not grow weary in doing good. So if you need encouragement and support in your role as a mom, as a homeschooler, then Simply Convivial Continuing Education is the place for you, and we would love to have you.